was 10 years old, I lived in a small coastal town in Newfoundland that was littered with large forests. Almost every house had acres and acres of forestry behind it, which in itself was very beautiful. As I now am 21 and live in a bustling city in Alberta, I do find myself missing this setting in my old backyard every once in a while, but it's usually accompanied by the unsettling memory of what I'm about to recount. By the time I was in grade 4, I was already trusted to be home by myself as my mother went out to visit my grandmother and aunt, who literally lived a few minutes down the road from us. I was happy to have such a privilege. I was an only child, and my father worked in another province months at a time, so I was very lucky to have this opportunity. It usually meant late night movies and video gaming, and on the odd night, exploring the forests. This night, I was exploring said woods. I usually never went too far in, usually up to a large rock formation I like to climb and look out through all the trees in all directions. The house was always in sight, so I never felt scared or frightened by being there. It felt like my own private place that I could enjoy. So, as I was scaling the rocks to sit in my usual spot, I suddenly started hearing a sound from further in, a sound that wasn't natural at all. Crying, faint crying. It sounded like a child, maybe even an infant, crying relentlessly. I was more puzzled than scared, since crying was the last thing I would expect to hear in the forest. I must have listened for a good few minutes, convinced my ears were playing tricks on me, but it was in fact crying. In my mind, I imagined it was a young girl that somehow wandered too far into the forest and needed help. I considered going back to the house and calling my mother to help, but then I worried that the girl would wander further in beyond earshot. I decided to try to locate the sound myself. I made my way hastily through the trees and branches, trying to figure out the exact direction the crying was in. It definitely wasn't as easy as I thought, and it was a matter of trial and error to even make sure I was going in the right direction. One thing I never realized as I was doing all of this was how consistent this crying was. No pauses, no words of any kind, just non-stop sobbing and wailing that had no end. What I did notice was that the closer I got to the sound, the more metallic it sounded to me. I eventually reached a small clearing that had only a few small trees and bushes and nothing else. I had never gone this far in before, so this was the first time I had ever seen it. When I made my way in, it didn't take long for me to find the source of the sound. A gray tape recorder. One of the biggest I had ever seen was peeking out of one of the bushes, and the crying was coming out of the speakers. This really disturbed me, as I had went all this way expecting to find a real person, but it was only a tape recorder? As I was about to shut it off, I heard another sound coming from just outside the clearing on the opposite side. It sounded like steady steps, advancing in my direction. It only took seeing a tall, shadowy figure coming my way to send me running. Fortunately, by some miracle, I recognized my way back by identifying rocks and trees as landmarks. Looking back, this probably saved my life. I never looked back, and I didn't try listening to see if that person was following me. I just kept telling myself to make it home and nothing else. I had to get home. Once I saw the large rock formation, it didn't take me long to know the rest of the way without needing to survey my surroundings. I was out of the forest in record time and immediately ran into my house, locking the door and shutting all of the lights off as I went to my bedroom. I didn't want this person to know where I lived, or I would be really done for. After shutting the curtains of my window, I peeked out through them as discreetly as I could to see if whoever had been out there had actually managed to keep up with me. I didn't see anyone, but I stayed by that window for a good hour, waiting for something to emerge out of the forest shadows. But nothing ever did. After that, I went straight to bed. I never did tell my mother about what happened that night, and I was never able to go back into that forest again.